Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Kesgrave Panthers Podcast. We are back after a bit of a break. Sorry about that. And today, our guest is Ipswich Eagles rider and now senior England international Ben Clarke. How are you today?
Hello. Oh, I'm excellent. Thanks. How about you?
No, I'm not too bad. Not too bad. How are you, Charlie?
Oh, I'm good, thanks.
Good,
Very
good,
nice.
good. So we'll start off how we normally start off, if I can remember really. But Ben, how did you get into Cycling Speedway?
So that's probably about 10, 11 years ago now. We had a friend who worked a family friend whose dad worked at Coes, and they were the company that sponsored Ipswich at the time. So they heard about it through work and decided to bring their kids down and invited us along. So we all went down to Ipswich, tried Cycling Speedway. They did it for a few years, but then left. But I sort of got into it and kept going.
Do you remember what your first meeting was?
Oh, must have been East Anglian Grand Prix. I don't think I did very well. I was not very good at the start. Probably somewhere near the back, but oh.
Yeah, it sounds a bit like me when I started, because like my parents are always taking the mick out of me because apparently I look very stupid when I first started. But that doesn't matter.
No, of course not.
But no. So did you say you didn't enjoy it at first as much?
No, I did enjoy it at first. I really got into it, but sort of the friends who I went with, I think they enjoyed it at first, but then quit after a while. Yeah, no, even though I wasn't doing very well, I still really enjoyed it and really got into it.
So,
what do you think it was that kind of kept you in it and not them?
It's a good question, really. I mean, probably about the same speed. I mean, I was quite active. I played a lot of football. I did sort of general road cycling and really loved riding my bike. I think it was just another sport, really. Just really liked to be active.
So what was it that kept so I don't imagine you do as much like football and stuff at the moment.
No.
So why did you choose Cycle Speedway over those other sports?
Well, by the time I sort of decided to focus on Cycle Speedway, I was sort of starting to come up through the ranks. And I mean, you probably won't want to hear this as Kesgrave riders, but my sort of progression went through beating Kesgrave riders because there were so many. I was sort of, right, your next target is beat James. And then eventually I beat them and I'd go to the next one. And eventually sort of got to Lewis, and then me and Lewis are sort of at the top of our age group. I think it's just competitive nature of sort of just the stepping stones of beating people, really.
So, do you like the competition, or do you prefer training and just the general fitness?
I really enjoy both. I think I enjoy the training anyway. If I was sort of just turning up to ride, I think I'd still do it. I'd still really enjoy it. And that's what I did for the first probably 3 or 4 years. But obviously having the opportunities to race in massive meetings and be competitive in the sport does give it a really nice edge, which I think is even more enjoyable.
So talking about massive meetings, it's a bit early on, but congratulations on your England senior call-up.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, first year out of juniors, so I was quite surprised, but I'm pleased I've been sort of picked up on as, one of the stronger riders. And yeah, I was really chuffed. I mean, you two also got England call-up, second cap for Noah, first cap for Charlie, so very well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. So what did it feel like riding for the England junior team last year?
Well, I mean, I think I've now done 3 caps, sort of 2 home internationals, and I was off in Poland. The home internationals are sort of really fun. You get to put on the shirt. I mean, England usually win, which is nice, I guess. But yeah, it's really good to just have the opportunity to ride for England. But I think once you go abroad and put on the England shirt in a sort of World Cup scenario, it's really different to sort of local riding. But obviously in Poland, we got the results, and that was really, really enjoyable. I mean, obviously, as you both know, Zach's a great manager, and I really enjoyed riding under him. And the team sort of closeness really was really, really good. We sort of hung out throughout the tour. It was a really great experience.
So, like, what does it feel like over in Poland? Like you say, you had the experiences with the World Cup and everything. So, what was that like? Was the atmosphere any different to?
Yeah, I'd say the Polish atmosphere is it's a bit more boisterous, really. There's a lot more sort of shouting and just noise, really. I mean, one thing, obviously, I went to Australia in 2017. I wasn't riding for England, but I was sort of the youngest person on the GB squad, and I was really lucky that I was able to travel for that. And there, I think it's more different than Poland, if anything. The track surface is more similar, but they sort of do they start you off over the loudspeaker, and then the sort of commentators and a lot of noise and screaming and shouting from Australian locals. And if anything, it's more off-putting because you can sort of understand them. You sort of shout that in Polish, and you sort of hear noise, but then there's Australian people shouting at you, and you're like, oh, blimey.
So you mentioned like the surface. Sorry.
The surface in Poland, it really varies from track to track. At the first track route where me, James, and Will Jeffrey won best pairs, that had just been relayed, but it didn't really have time to settle. So if you put the power down, you were like wheel spinning down the straights, and if anything, it made the team riding better because you couldn't really get away. It was really physical. And I think that's something you'll get used to over any of the tours. It's just the physicality of the Polish riders is something to get used to, but it isn't too bad.
Yeah, so speaking about Polish riders, do you have any aims for this summer at the European Championships?
That's a good question. I mean, I'd love to make the finals. And if I can make the senior finals, I'll be really pleased. I mean, really just to do as well in that as possible. I haven't heard anything about any team selections for Poland. I think as a club thing, as a club event, and Ipswich should have a strong team for that. And yeah, I think my overall aim for the summer is really just to do as well as I can in the senior standings. So obviously, last year I got a feel for how well I was doing in Great Britain, but it really does sort of change your perspective when you turn up after not seeing foreign riders for like 4 years now and seeing how they're riding.
So we've spoken like quite a bit about the team side of things. Do you prefer that to the individual?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think personally I prefer individual riding if I was going to turn up. But I think for like national level stuff, I prefer team riding. But for local level, I do really like how much more involved team riding is, especially when you're sort of doing local league. It just you just get to know the other teams and you get to know your teammates better. And you're not going flat out. You're sort of trying to be a bit more tactical and have a think about what you're doing. So yeah, at national level, I think I do prefer individual riding. Also, because at the really sort of sharp end of the sport, individual riding, if you sort of muck up a meeting, that's on you. If you do that in a team scenario, then the whole team's lost points, which it's great. It's even better if you do well. But then if you do make a mistake, it's a lot more challenging. Yeah, I think I'm quite glad we're in a sport where there are two such varied disciplines within the sport. But yeah, I think it depends on the context which I'm riding for which one I prefer.
Yes. So about individual racing, your performance in the British Championships last year was quite something. Both you and Louis in the juniors and making the senior final. So how was that for you, really?
Yeah. I mean, I'd won the juniors in 2018, 2019, obviously no 2020. So I was hoping to go for a third, but on the day it didn't work out. Ended up having a run off of Louis. And unfortunately, I got the gate 4 around East Newport, which made it a bit challenging. But I was really chuffed to have made the senior final. I wouldn't say I made a massive impact. I was probably at the bottom end of the field, but it was a really great experience. I mean, it's a bit like Poland, really, around Horsepath, which is quite a small track with the really big physical riders. It was really close and physical, and you two were both there and watching, and no one could really get away. And if they did, they were lucky. And yeah, I think it's I'd done a few invitationals, I've done the Laurels and a few other bits and bobs, but I think British finals it felt like going over to Australia or Poland, just with the pressure and the quality in the field. But it's a really enjoyable thing to do.
So, do you enjoy that pressure, or do you feel like it kind of gets to you?
I'd say it gets to me, but it doesn't negatively impact my performance. So if there's a sort of massive match, I'll just take an hour out before just to have a really comprehensive warm up and just make sure I keep drinking and eating well throughout the day. And yeah, for that hour before, I don't really listen to music. I sort of just ride around, do sprints, do stretches, just make sure I'm really ready. And on the tapes, it's always quite tense. But once the race gets underway, it's just like a normal race with a very strong field. But I think a sort of packed crowd like there is at World Championships and British Championships definitely makes the racing more intense. But I think I enjoy that. I don't really mind if I don't do well, and it makes doing well that much better.
So would you say that British Championships is probably the most intense meeting you've raced in, or was there one that had a bigger tension?
Probably the individual under 16 and junior finals in 2019, although I ended up crashing in both of them and missing out on podiums. But I'd say the build up to those two was a lot more intense because you sort of traveled to Poland, you've done so much racing, and then that final weekend is what it all essentially builds up to. And yeah, the pressure didn't really get to me, but I still ended up crashing in both of them. Although it wasn't just crashing by myself, there were incidents. But yeah, that was probably more intense than the British final, but the British final was still pretty full on.
So what would you say is like your biggest achievement from riding?
Probably the biggest sort of individual thing was probably winning my first British title when in 2018, because I signed up to do the under 16s, and Dad came in, I think I was in here actually, and was like, oh, there's a space left in the under 18s, do you want to just give it a go? I was like, well, there's no harm in turning up. And then everything just went really well. I think I was one of the younger riders. I mean, I was come third in the under 16s the year before, but no one really was looking out for me, and that definitely benefited me. So, for example, when I was against Will Jeffrey and Fraser, they just went for each other and I just rode on. And the only person that actually beat me in the end was Louis in my first race. And yeah, everything sort of fell into place, and that was quite special. That was my first big win, and it was in the 3-year age category above, and it was just so unexpected. But then I was definitely a marksman in the under 16s the next day and was just bullied by everyone, but oh well.
What did that title feel like? So like going in as an underdog, like no one really expected it. So what did it feel like when you knew you'd won it, really?
It was quite surreal. As I said, it was my first big title win, and to do it against such strong riders that are older than me, it didn't really sink in at first. I was like, "Ooh, I've got British champion shirt and I'm on the top step," but I didn't really think, "Oh yeah, I've just won the whole thing." But I think having not won anything before, I didn't really know how to react. So I was just kind of didn't really, yeah, it was a bit surreal. Didn't really sink in until a few days later. I was like, ooh, blimey.
Did you feel like, because you'd won the year before, the next year when you went back, did you feel like there was some pressure put on you?
Yeah, definitely. I was the marked person in that great meeting. Oh, actually, that was at Kesgrave, so you're both probably there as well. And yeah, that was a lot more intense, especially with the nature of Kesgrave. At Cookson Park in 2018, it's a really fast track, which suits me, so I can sort of get away. But at Kesgrave, it's off the gates with riders like sort of Louis and Fraser and Will Jeffrey and Cam Gill and all of the strong riders. It's really just daunting when you are that marked person. I ended up winning that as well, which I was really happy with. But yeah, it was definitely a world of difference compared to my first one.
So, like, what does it feel like going into those meetings, like that you're expected to win, really, or expected to do well? Do you prepare any differently, or is it always the same for you before meetings?
I mean, before big meetings, my physical warm up is always the same, so just riding around, stretching, doing sprints. But the mental aspect's very different. I wouldn't say I put pressure on myself, but I still feel pressure. Sort of lining up to the tapes. Usually, I don't sort of twitch or get affected, but you are just sort of thinking, "Don't twitch," and if anything, it's probably not the right thing to think because you end up twitching, but you sort of overthink everything and you kind of just have to clear your head, because when I think, especially in Cycling Speedway, when you overthink, that's when things tend to go wrong. You sort of have to be a bit more spontaneous and take everything a step at a time, which is what I tried to do, and it sort of worked out. But yeah, the mental aspect's a lot different when you are the favourite for a big title.
So earlier you mentioned like how you like Cookson Park and how like you felt you could get away on it.
Yeah.
Are there any other tracks that you like?
I mean, being my home track, I'm a fan of Ipswich. I'd say I'm quite a fast rider, and that's quite a big track. Although, actually, we were talking about it after the local match on Wednesday. It's Ipswich, you always get unexpectedly past, where other tracks, like, I don't know, Kesgrave, you can always see it coming. So I think I do prefer the bigger tracks. I'd say East Park, I'm good, but I don't want to say it's too big, because it's not too big. You can't really have too big of a track, but it's definitely a different type of riding to a sort of Horsepath or Kesgrave or even East London. But yeah, I'd say my favourite probably Poole, Ipswich, Cookson, just sort of big tracks really. Wensfield, another one.
So would you say there's any tracks that are too small, maybe?
I wouldn't like to say too small. I wouldn't say a Cycling Speedway track's the wrong shape, but I definitely struggle at Hellingly.
Yeah, I think everyone does.
Yeah, it's just such a it kind of feels like riding a Polish track, really. You just have to be, your bike handling has to be so on point to just get around the corners, really. And I'd say I enjoy the technicality, but you definitely have to put yourself in a different mindset when going there, especially riding against their team full of pretty strong riders, actually, who know the track really well. And yeah, there's definitely some adjustment. I'd say another track you two might not have ridden there, but Colchester was an interesting one. It's had two really big humps, and you've got so much speed coming out the corner. It was ridiculous, but that definitely made racing a bit more exciting.
So, what was I going to say? So, you know, with you said how Hellingly, you know, and like the Polish tracks, they're really different. Do you like prepare for them in any, you know, special way?
I mean, sort of letting your tires down is a good start, but I think sort of not well maintained, but with tracks with slightly grippier surfaces, you can really just sort of plant your tyres and just trust that the bike's going to go around the corner. Where there, you sort of need foot down, almost going into the corner and all the way out, because if you do lose the back end, you're just going to get past or you're going to fall off. So say it's quite hard to prepare. I mean, I think people have sort of prepared by going to Somersham when it's dry, and just it is a bit like that, except on a bigger track. Your back end can just go, and you've got to either catch it or you're falling off. But yeah, I'd say when you've been riding Cycling Speedway long enough, you're prepared for most surfaces. It just takes you a little while when you get there to get used to it.
Yeah, so would you say, like, well, people obviously prefer the grippier tracks, but do you enjoy the challenge of riding the less grippier tracks? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I enjoy just riding more than getting results if I do get them, and the added technicality, which just brings the pack closer together, just makes racing more interesting. There'll be riders who have maybe better bike handling than me, who will be right with me or even in front of me on those more challenging tracks. And I think it's good to have tracks like that because it gets everyone a bit more involved with the racing, and it puts riders like me, who you might expect to win at Ipswich, under a bit more pressure. And I don't see it as a bad thing. It's always good to have a bit more variety within sport. So yeah, I enjoy them.
Do you think that like the home track advantage, do you think that plays a big part in some meetings?
I mean, there are definitely extremes. Like I said, at Headingley, you're riding riders who really know the track. But I wouldn't say I have a massive home track advantage at Ipswich. I train there, which means I'm kind of used to the pickup points and where to turn in. But I'm by no means unbeatable there. Like, I'm not at any track. I'd say I think the smaller technical tracks do give more of a home advantage because people know how to ride them and how to really be on the edge of those tracks, where you can't really get a feel for that in 15, 20 minutes of warming up. I'd say more for team riding than individual riding. I'd say, yeah, but so overall, I'd say it is a factor, but not so much at high level or on bigger tracks, because once you're at the high level or on a bigger track, I think it's people can just, at the high level, so many people can just ride anything really well. And bigger tracks is more about speed than it is technicality. So I think it's sort of not evens it out, but other riders will still be able to beat home riders there.
Yeah, so I think we've done quite well today, got through a lot in the time we've had. So I just want to say thank you, Ben, for joining us today.
That's all right.
And thank you, Charlie, for being here with me, as usual.
Thank you, Charlie.
And yeah, so we will see everybody next time. Goodbye.
Nice. Bye.